Nobody tells you about the loneliness. Every tradition, every teacher, every book about awakening describes what waits on the other side. The vast openness, the dissolution of separation, the profound sense of belonging to something larger than the self, the infinite, the peace that surpasses understanding. What they rarely describe is the territory you have to cross to get there. Because before awareness feels infinite, it feels isolating in a way that has no adequate comparison. A particular kind of alone that isn't loneliness in the ordinary sense. It isn't the ache of missing a specific person or wanting company. It is something stranger and more fundamental than that. The feeling of having seen something you cannot unsee, of having stepped outside a shared dream that everyone around you is still sleeping inside, of speaking a language that has no native speakers in your immediate world. This experience stops more people in their awakening than almost anything else, not because the path becomes too difficult, but because the loneliness feels like evidence that something has gone wrong. It hasn't. It is one of the most reliable signs that something is going profoundly right. Part 1. What actually creates the loneliness? To understand why awareness feels lonely before it feels infinite, you have to understand what ordinary social connection is actually built on. Most human belonging, the warm, frictionless sense of being part of a group, a culture, a relationship, is built on shared assumptions, shared frameworks about what matters, what is real, what constitutes success and failure, what the self is, and what it needs. You belong when you share the map. When your understanding of how things work matches closely enough with the understanding of those around you that communication feels effortless and presence feels natural. Awakening dismantles the map, not all at once, and not irreversibly. Eventually, a deeper connection becomes possible that transcends the shared map entirely. But in the middle stage, the map that structured your belonging has been significantly disrupted, and the deeper connection isn't yet stable enough to replace it. So you sit across from people you have known for years and feel, beneath the familiar surface of the conversation, a gap. Not because you love them less, not because they are wrong and you are right, but because the framework through which you are experiencing reality has shifted in a way that is genuinely difficult to communicate. And the attempt to communicate it often produces exactly the response that deepens the isolation. Confusion, polite dismissal, the subtle social pressure to return to the shared map everyone else is navigating by. The loneliness of early awareness is the loneliness of the gap between the map you've outgrown and the territory you haven't yet fully inhabited. Part 2. The self that loses its audience. There is a deeper mechanism operating beneath the social one. For most of a human life, the sense of self is sustained partly by its reflection in others. Identity is not just an internal structure. It is a performance that requires an audience. The way people respond to you, the roles you occupy in their lives, the consistency of how you are seen and known. All of this provides a continuous external confirmation that the self you believe yourself to be is real. When awareness begins to expand past the boundaries of the constructed self, that self starts losing its solidity. The identity that was clear becomes uncertain. The roles that felt defining begin to feel like costumes. The opinions and preferences and personality traits that felt like you begin to feel like furniture, real but not fundamental. And the people in your life who knew how to relate to the previous version with ease begin to feel like mirrors reflecting a face that no longer fully matches what you find when you look inward. This creates a particular kind of vertigo, The external confirmation is still arriving. People still see you as who you were, but it no longer lands. It doesn't reach the thing that needs confirming, because the thing that needed confirming is in the process of dissolving. You are becoming something that cannot be validated from the outside. And until the ground of awareness stabilizes enough to provide its own confirmation, there is a period of floating, unmoored from the old self, not yet anchored in the new recognition. That floating feels like loneliness. It is actually the beginning of freedom. Part 3. Why it becomes infinite. The loneliness of awakening is not permanent. It is transitional, and what it is transitioning toward is a quality of connection more fundamental than anything the social self ever provided. The ordinary sense of belonging is built on sameness, on sharing the map, the framework, the identity structure. It is real, but it is fragile. It depends on the agreement holding. When the agreement shifts, the belonging shifts with it. The belonging that awareness eventually discovers is built on something that cannot shift, because it is not constructed at all. It is the recognition that at the level of pure awareness, there is no separation to be lonely across. The boundaries that created the isolation between self and other, between inside and outside, between the observer and the observed, are discovered to have been conceptual rather than actual. The infinite does not feel like the absence of loneliness. It feels like the discovery that what you took to be loneliness was actually spaciousness, and what you took to be separation was actually the texture of a connection so total it had no edges to recognize itself by. This recognition doesn't arrive as a belief or a philosophy. It arrives as a direct experience, usually quiet, usually ordinary seeming in its context, of the awareness in which everything is appearing being recognized as the same awareness. Not yours, not theirs. The awareness showing up here and there and everywhere simultaneously, wearing different faces, living different lives, but never actually divided. The loneliness was the last defense of the separate self, making the dissolution feel like loss rather than homecoming. And when it finally releases, what remains is not aloneness at all. It is the realization that you were never separate from anything. If you are in the lonely part right now, if awareness has opened enough that the old belonging no longer fits, but not enough that the new ground feels stable, hear this: you have not made a mistake. You have not gone too far or lost something essential. You have not broken yourself by looking too closely at what is real. You are in the crossing, the part between the map and the territory, the part every genuine traveler of this path has moved through, often in silence, often without a guide, often convinced that the isolation was permanent. It is not permanent. It is the narrowest part of the passage. Stay with the awareness that is opening, not the loneliness it is dressed in, but the awareness itself. Vast, still, present, already here, already holding everything, including the ache of feeling separate from it. The loneliness is the self's last argument, and awareness is already the answer.